Welcome back to another episode of the Unstuck Career Podcast and happy week of Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Festivus, whatever holiday or lack of that you celebrate. This is the week. This is the week that is kind of busy. It's kind of a weird week for a lot of people because Christmas is on a Thursday, which means Friday. We have, and here's my cat who has missed me because I've been gone for several days. We have uh, a lot of companies that are just closed on Christmas, back to work on Friday. And so if that's you, sorry. But in my experience, a lot of those Fridays get to be kind of um, light days. And we'll have the same thing next week with New Year's on Thursday. And of course, New Year's Eve is really the big event. And then New Year's Day, and then back to work on Friday. So today, I want to spend a few days. I want to spend a few minutes. We'll do another one of these next week because I've got two different processes that I would like you to, I would encourage you to try. These are some things that I have done in my own life and have been really helpful. The one that I'm going to describe today, this year is the first year I've done it. I did this just last week, and it has been really interesting for me to think about my 2025, think about 2026 in a little bit more productive way. And then what we're going to talk about next week is going to be the process that I've done for the last 2 years. I'm going to do it again on New Year's Eve. And so next Monday, when that releases, then I'll walk you through that process in a little bit more detail. But there will be some overlap. So if you do what we're talking about right now, you will be off to a good start with what we do next week. I'm going to call this the reset. Now, if you are getting my emails, you may have already seen this. If you are one of my clients, then we've already talked about this. So if that doesn't fit you yet or at all, then let me just set this up. And I want to explain a little bit about the context for how I'm coming into this from my historical experience. I spent a lot of my life, I'm 57, I'm not afraid to admit that. I spent a lot of my life, and I would put it at 50 years. I would put it at 55 years. 55 years of my life. I hated goals, hated goals because I couldn't achieve them. I couldn't crack the code. And I would grow up. I remember having conversations, really lectures from my dad, where he would talk about the importance of setting goals. Goals, one of his favorite things to talk about. And SMART goals. SMART goals were the things that he really leaned into, specific, measurable, attainable, which I struggle with that one because I don't know that that exists, though at least the way that the SMART goal people meant. And technically, the originator of the SMART goal was creating a business goal structure, not a personal goal structure. And so the A was not attainable, it was assignable. Changes the context a little bit, but attainable, relevant, or realistic, which depends on what version you're looking at. Attainable and realistic are really the same thing. So relevant and then time bound. And in general, I don't think that that's bad. I just think it's incomplete. I think there are a couple things. And so because of that, I'm not going to get into my whole soapbox about goals. But because of the way that goals hadn't worked for me, I just refused to set goals. I refused to set goals. New Year's resolutions wouldn't do it. And I'll give you an example of a New Year's resolution and how it often works with people. And because we may have an end result. For me, uh, my health, and really it was my physical, um, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily weight. It was probably strength that I wanted to improve. So I had this ambitious, I'm going to go to the gym every week. And I think it was 5 times a week. It was really ambitious. Going from 0 to 5 times a week, that's a stretch. And day one doesn't count because it's a holiday. So the gym is closed. So day two, I don't feel like it. And it was by day 3 or day 4. It was that first week of the year. This is several years ago that gave, I didn't just miss. I gave up. I quit the goal. did not pursue it at all over the course of the year. Wiped it from my memory. And that's how a lot of my goals were. That was the result for a lot of my goals. I did not have any. I would try something. I would get excited about the end result. I would take a step or two, maybe try for a day or two, and then decide that's not worth it, or it's not something that I want to pursue. And so that was several years ago. So I had this big block of time where done, out of here, not going to do any goals, don't care, not interested. And I just, by the way, we live our lives achieving goals. But if we're not consciously, intentionally, by design, choosing the goals that we want, then we're drifting. We're living somebody else's goals. And what I mean by that, here, first of all, the idea that we're living by goals. Your alarm rings in the morning, and you may not have a written goal, and there's this, it's not true, but people will tell you that if it's not written down, it's not a goal, it's a dream. That is not true, because you have a goal, for example, to get into the shower probably every day. You have a goal to have something that you eat probably every single day. And if you don't have that written down, probably, but it doesn't change the fact that that's a goal and you accomplish it every single day. So that's what I mean when I say we have goals. We're just not choosing our goals intentionally many times. And so the goal that shows up for us is what we end up going with. So if you don't have the intentional by design goal that I'm going to maintain this level of health or weight or eating protocol or whatever it is, when somebody shows up and says something like, I'm going to grab some Taco Bell. Do you want something? Yeah, I'll grab some. I'll get some Taco Bell, because I don't have the decision made that I'm going to eat a specific way or I'm going to avoid certain foods. So that's the setup for where I came from. And I started to catch the vision 2 years ago. Just 2 years ago, as I started to catch the vision of goals and what was possible. And the goal is, I thought that the purpose of the goal was achieving the thing. And when I didn't achieve the thing, that I thought, this is a waste of my time. And then I discovered, and if you don't know this, spoiler alert, the goal is not about achieving the thing. It's about who you become in the process. So if I have a goal, an ambitious goal, to get to a certain weight, it's not about getting the weight. You could get to the weight really easily, surgically, maybe not ethically, but you could get to a weight by having parts removed. And you would hit the goal technically, because you'd get on the scale and the weight would show up. But that's not what it is that we want. We don't want necessarily the end result. If your goal is to run a marathon, you could Photoshop yourself at the finish line. You could go probably to Goodwill and buy a medal. That's not what you're looking for. You're not looking for the end result of, here's the evidence that I finished the marathon. You're looking for the who you become in the process, the strength, the fortitude, the ambition, all the things that change you because of what it is that you've accomplished. So now that's kind of the setup. So the purpose of today is, I want you, because everybody deserves to have a much better life than what they have. I think we deserve much better lives than what we are willing to demand of ourselves. And I'm growing into this idea. So if you're there, congratulations. I love it for you. And come back next week. But if that's not you, if you're just kind of settling for something that's not quite what you really want, then here's a way that you can get a little bit closer to that. We're going to do a reset. We're going to do a 2025 reset. And my cat is just active today. Can you tell? We're going to do a 2025 reset. So there are going to be 6 questions. 6 questions that I want you to think about. I'm not going to stop and give you, because then we'd have 5 blocks of 5 minutes of empty time. I don't want to do that for the sake of this, the video itself. The If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, having a 4 or 5 minute block of silence is not going to be super helpful. But you can, if you're watching this not live, you can pause the video, you can pause the audio, and actually do the exercises. If you're driving, then now may not be a good time to do it. So you may want to come back to this. But I'm going to ask some questions. I want you to write down some things and really give it some thought. You will get more out of it if you spend a little bit of time. And I'll do a little bit of prompting as well. 6 questions. And what we want to do is we want to kind of remind ourselves of what 2025 has been all about for us. And again, like with the goal isn't about accomplishing the things, it's about setting the direction for our life. And so we're going to set our direction for 2026. Here's how we're going to do it. Question number 1. I want you to think back to the year 2025, January 1st, 2025, to today, whatever day it is that you're watching this. If you're not watching the live broadcast, you could be watching it, whatever. From January to today, what are the wins? What are the successes? What are the things that worked really well? Think back to January. And I'm not going to go through every month, but think back to the things over the course of the year. You probably have some of these documented. You may have them documented on your calendar. You may have some of them documented on your camera roll. You may have some of them documented via text message. Hey, so you may send a friend a message, or a partner, or a boss, or a parent, or somebody. This is something exciting that I've just done. But think back and give yourselves 5 or so minutes to just think back over the course of the year at what went well, what worked. So if you're at a point where you can pause this, if it's live, you can't really pause it. But if you're at a point where you can pause this, now would be a good time. Just go back and think about over the course of 2025, what worked? What were your wins? What were your successes? And they can be big, they can be small. The big ones, probably easy to think about. The small ones, maybe a little bit harder to think of. But think about everything. And this is not going to be an all-inclusive list, because it is really hard to, in a few minutes, remember 350, 360 days of successes. You've had wins every day. So think of those. Could be mindset as well. But think of those wins and write those down. As more come up over the course of the next few days, you can add to your list. Now, let's pivot. Let's shift. We've talked about the wins. Now let's talk about the weaknesses. What were your misses for 2025? Think about, there might be specific things that your business didn't generate the income that you wanted, that your grades weren't what you wanted them to be, that you didn't accomplish certain things that you had expected to or wanted to over the course of the year, that you had some targets that maybe you missed. So same thing, spend 5 minutes or so thinking about, where did you miss the boat over the last 12 months? And the purpose of this is not to beat yourself up. The purpose of this is to just objectively, we're not perfect. What areas in your life could have gone better? Again, could be mindset, could be skill set, could be function, could be, you can see, for example, I have things out, not put away. So maybe there's some administrative things that you could do better, and just make a list of those things. As long as the list needs to be right until your brain's empty, as I oftentimes will say if you're journaling, and I'll give you some time now to do that. Now, if we were doing this in person, I would actually be silent for about 5 minutes. I'm not going to do that right now, because a podcast episode that is silent, not super exciting. Now, I want to hint at something that I teach my clients, and so I'm going to share that with you as well. These failures are not indications that you're a failure. And this, again, this was one of my misunderstandings in my earlier days when it came to goals. I assumed that missing the goal, failing at the goal meant I'm a failure. That's not true. A miss, a mistake, a failure, a weakness is not a problem. It's information. And so we're going to use this as information. I want you to think about, well, before we do that, I want to come back to that because I want to spend a little bit more time on that after we're going to spend the time on the weaknesses just a little bit longer. There are three different ways we can look at our weaknesses. The weaknesses, some of the weaknesses are things that we really want to do better at. So for me, if I use my workspace as a weakness, this may be something that I want to make a strength. I want to make organization a strength, or I want to make, it could be anything at all. It could be if you are in sales and you want to increase your sales closing rate. That would be a weakness that you want to make a strength. Maybe you have a failed or failing relationship. And you want to turn that weakness into a strength. You want to strengthen your relationship or your ability to have good, deep relationships. So think about the weaknesses that you just wrote down and identify the ones that you want to turn into strengths. These are going to be the things that over the course of the year, you'll focus on developing those weaknesses and helping them be strengths. So you can mark those any way that you want. You can write them down as a separate question block. These are the weaknesses that I want to have strengths. You can have that as a column. There are going to be two other categories for all of the weaknesses, and we're going to categorize all of our weaknesses into one of these three categories. Strengths, these are weaknesses that will become strengths. The second category is going to be the weaknesses that we don't want to own anymore. And so there'll be things that we decide to delegate. For example, I may choose to delegate mowing my lawn. I have a son who used to mow the lawn, but he moved out. He went to college. And so that, not that my lawn is a weakness, but my desire to mow the lawn, certainly not a strength. And so I can delegate that. I can either assign that to, actually, my wife really enjoys mowing the lawn. So she may take on that responsibility, or I could hire somebody. I can hire somebody to mow the lawn. So you can delegate, sometimes with money, sometimes not with money. You can work things out, but you can delegate weaknesses so that you don't have to worry about it. If you're not great at administrative tasks, then you can delegate some of those to a person, maybe to AI. So make a list of the things that you want to delegate. Third category for your weaknesses. There are some weaknesses you just don't have to deal with anymore. These are weaknesses, and this is where we're going to spend our time next week. So what we do right now is going to set us up well for what we do next week. But I want you to think about the weaknesses that you're ready to just release. You're going to let these weaknesses go. These are things that you're not going to they're just not going to be part of your life anymore. And I'm not going to get into a lot because we'll spend plenty of time talking about that next week. But just give that some thought. One of the three categories, put every one of your weaknesses into something that you're going to turn into a strength, something you're going to delegate to somebody else or something else, or that you're just going to let it go altogether. And take a few minutes and do that. Once that's done, now we're going to get into the lessons. Our weaknesses are not deficiencies of character. They're lessons. So let's talk about the lessons that those weaknesses, and it could be other things. It could be strengths. It could be some of the wins that taught us lessons. It could be a win that I didn't realize I was capable of doing something as ambitious as I did. So think about over the course of the year, what are the lessons that you learned? The big lessons, the small lessons, the overall themes for the year. What are the lessons? And I'm going to give you a couple minutes to do that. Again, if you're watching this live, I'm not pausing, but you can pause on the replay and just make a list of the lessons. If we're not examining our life, and this is a new realization for me, if we're not examining our life, then we're just kind of coasting, we're drifting. So let's examine, think about what's working, what's not working. So that's, I think we've got four: strengths, weaknesses, categorize your weaknesses. Now we just talked about the lessons that we learned. Two more questions. Number 5 question. This is going to be the fun one. A little bit of a challenge. This is not going to be an all-inclusive, exhaustive list when you do it for the next 5 minutes. But take a few minutes and just brainstorm every win that you want for 2026. At the end of 2026, just assume we're going to do the same thing, that we're going to sit down and talk about, okay, what were your wins for 2026? What do you want to have on that list? What wins do you want to have in 2026? And I want you to dream big. I want you to imagine what's possible. And the thing to catch, because if you're like me, as I was going through this, I had a lot of thoughts. Well, I don't know how to do that. Well, I can't do that because ignore those thoughts. We're just dreaming. We're just brainstorming. Just if everything worked, what would I love to say that I accomplished in 2026? And write all those things down. I'll give you a minute. That was your cue to pause, by the way, if you're listening to this or watching it on the replay. But the thing that's really interesting for me is how many times, and we'll talk over the course of the year, we're going to talk about limiting beliefs, but we have these limiting beliefs that stop us from even imagining something big. So we want to just set that thought aside and imagine. Over the course of the next several days, weeks, maybe even months, you may have other things that come up. So this is a list that can continue to evolve. Add to it as things come up. In fact, as I'm speaking this right now, I had a new thing that came up for me that I would love to accomplish in 2026. So I'm going to put that on my list. So number 5, what are your wins for 2026? And go big. You may not accomplish everything, but you may accomplish a lot of things when you know the direction of your life. Now, that's where number 6 comes in. The last question. Make sure that everything that's on that list for your wins for 2026 aligns with the direction of your life. If your direction is to be a person who is, and I'm just making stuff up. If you want to be in service to other people, you want to contribute in a meaningful way, and you find that there are things on your list that don't allow you to contribute in a meaningful way, then maybe that's something that shouldn't be on your list. So you just want to make sure everything on your list is meaningful. It's contributing, it's aligned with who you are becoming or who you expect to become over the course of the year. So this one for me was really quick because I didn't have any ideas that I could come up with for what I wanted to have at the end of 2026 that was inconsistent with who I see myself becoming over the course of the year. And not just the course of the year, but beyond as well. So that's it. That's our 2026 reset. This is a way without making specific New Year's resolutions, which I'm not going to talk about that much. Maybe not at all next week. And I don't know that it will tie in much. But you may have some resolutions. What we do next week is really more about identity. We're going to talk about our 2026 identity. And there may be some resolutions that come as a part of that. But really what we want to do is we want to kind of set the direction for our lives for the coming year and make sure that the direction is aligned with who we are at our core and who we want to become. So there we are, 2026 reset. Hold on to that because it will come in handy next week as we go through our 2026. I don't even know what I'm going to call it yet, but it's going to be our identity evolution. And same thing with our identity. We're going to shift our identity into the version that we want to become that's going to be more aligned with what we want for ourselves, for our lives, for the upcoming year. I'm excited about what's coming. And if you have questions about this process or next week when we go through the next process, I'm happy to entertain those. I'm happy to answer your questions. If you want to talk um, via email, I'm happy to do that. Ken at kenwilliamscoaching.com. Shoot me an email. If you want to get on a call, you're welcome to do that as well. There should be a link in the comments or in the description that will take you to my calendar. And yeah, it's actually me. If you get on my calendar, it's actually with me. So let's make 2026 the most amazing year ever. And I'm looking forward to being there with you. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.